Hello, my name is Ed Martin, and I'm the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. I had the great privilege of knowing the late Phyllis Schlafly for decades and working with her for years. She was an extraordinary American. She had incredible wisdom, she was wonderful to work with, and a great friend and leader. About a year ago, I heard about a series that was coming out on FX, on Hulu, called Mrs. America. This series was going to star Cate Blanchett, and it's going to purport to cover the ERA fight, and Phyllis Schlafly is going to be one of the central characters. She's Mrs. America. And I thought at that time, boy, I'm not sure I trust FX and Cate Blanchett to tell the story of Phyllis Schlafly that I know. And lo and behold, it looks like they're not telling the truth about Phyllis Schlafly. We're going to spend some time today, and I'm going to fact check the trailer from Mrs. America, which is launching on April 15th on Hulu. If you want to find out more, go to realmrsamerica.com. That's realmrsamerica.com, and you'll see lots of our fact checking and lots of the truth about Phyllis Schlafly. Because no matter what Hollywood says, no matter what Cate Blanchett or others try to depict, the truth is out there, and we want to bring it to you. So let's fact check this trailer. Join me, please.
I am not against women. I am not against women working outside the home. But what I am against is the women's liberation movement.
Well, when you look at that opening scene or these early opening scenes, you say, wow, it looks like classic America. If you look closely, there's a sign that says Service Ontario. Well, they filmed this in Canada, and the star is Cate Blanchett, an Australian. And although some of the writers and producers are Americans, it's a good snapshot that they may not really know what the American values are and the American leader that is Phyllis Schlafly. As you watch this, think to yourself, do they understand America, or are they coming at this from Hollywood? I think you'll see it's Hollywood, not America. Let's check some more.
Who the hell is Phyllis Schlafly?
This is one of the most important documents that Phyllis Schlafly was involved in. She wrote the Phyllis Schlafly report for over 50 years every month. I remember running into people like John Ashcroft, who told me that every month he got the Phyllis Schlafly report and he read it cover to cover. People all across the country cared about and followed Phyllis's leadership. Well, when it's Hollywood, they take the image. It looks a lot like the Phyllis Schlafly report. They don't want to break the copyright, so they don't actually use the name. But more importantly, they don't even get the facts right. The famous Phyllis Schlafly report that Phyllis wrote from February of 1972 was called What's Wrong with Equal Rights for Women? But it wasn't Volume 5, Issue 4. It was Volume 5, Issue 7. They're not even bothering to check the basic facts. It's an indication of what's going on in this Mrs. America. Let's look for more.
We need to get the word out quickly. We want the right to be a mother.
One of the things that frustrates me about watching this trailer is the depiction of Phyllis and her family as, unhappy and angry. If you look at the depiction of her children, they look unhappy, they look sad, it's just patently false. Phyllis had 6 children, and she reveled in her children's successes in medicine and law and business. She had many grandchildren. She loved being around them, even great-grandchildren. And the idea that they're somehow dour and sad, it's just not factual. It's mean. It's not true. It's Hollywood. Let's take a look at some more.
The right to be a wife. The liberals want to create a sex-neutral, feminist, totalitarian nightmare.
Do you know what you're saying has no basis in fact?
Our movement is about fighting the oppression of all women.
We do not want housewives.
Well, this is where it gets really, it's not comical because it's sinister. Meet Alice. Alice is a fictional character that's added to the Mrs. America script. She's supposed to be Phyllis's best friend and neighbor, but she doesn't exist. She's played by a famous actress, the bisexual Sarah Paulson, and you get a sense early on that what's Alice up to if she's fictional? See, I think she's going to be someone that they use to say and do terrible things about what's going on because they're making it up. That's what Hollywood does. The truth of real Mrs. America is much more joy, much more interest, and much more real friendships, not made up stuff. Let's keep watching.
Thinking that we are against them.
We are against them.
Revolutions are messy. How long are we supposed to wait? How much time do
This is a classic depiction of Hollywood depicting a strong woman who's successful, surrounded by men. as if the people who were behind opposing the Equal Rights Amendment were all white men and who were dour and mean. The truth is that Phyllis was surrounded by really smart women, mostly, and some men, but she had lots of joy. And this idea is to sort of reinforce that it was somehow men and the patriarchy that Phyllis was aiding and holding people down. It's patently false. It's ahistorical. It's not true. Well, it's Hollywood. It's not the real Mrs. America. Let's keep watching.
We get people to adapt to change. Or am I the only one who's so tired of waiting?
Oh, this is the best. Look at this. When you see a screen that says, based on true events, you know they're lying. Because you see, if you said, if you want to put up on the screen, say, based on the facts, this is true, this is a true story, but based on true events, that means they're going to lie and mislead you, and they want you to know. They're warning you. That's Hollywood's warning. Lies are coming. There'll be more. Let's take a look.
This fight is not about equality.
Well, here's the opposite of earlier when they tried to make Phyllis look like she was aligned with some mean patriarchy in her efforts. Here's the women's livers. They make them look diverse, as if there's lots of diversity. Go back and look. There wasn't much diversity back then. There was quite a lot of bigotry amongst the feminists in terms of who they wanted to work with. And they make them seem happy. Go back and look. Look at the interviews. Didn't look happy. The famous convention in a conference for women in 1977 in Houston, the images of it were searing. The American people saw ugliness, unhappiness, anger from the feminists that were pushing the ERA. It was one of the reasons that some of the major supporters, including one governor of a Midwest state who said, once I saw that on the TV, I knew I couldn't support it. So that's what the reality is, not this happy-go-lucky band of sisters who are fighting. Not true. Hollywood. Let's keep watching.
It's about power. And I'm just getting started.
Here we go again with Phyllis as this angry leader. Again, I knew her for decades, and I worked closely with her every day for years at the end of her life. I never saw this angry thing. Didn't mean she didn't care, wasn't strong, but this idea of turning her into someone who is an angry kind of leader, it's just false. And all you'd have to do to find that truth out is talk to anyone who knew her. In fact, here's an example. Phil Donahue, on whose show she appeared scores of times, he would tell you she was as charming as could be. This kind of anger is meant to send a message about this Mrs. America that's not real. Let's keep watching.
We are a political movement, not a sorority.
So now we're not going to have people we disagree with participate?
We don't get to decide how the battle lines are drawn.
Well, that one makes you wonder, can they get anything right in this Mrs. America? This image is of Phyllis Schlafly shooting a rifle. Now, Phyllis was an avid supporter of the Second Amendment. I remember vividly she received a great award at the NRA convention, and they gave her an old musket, and there's a picture of her holding it up. She believed in the Second Amendment. So important. She loved the Constitution. But this picture, as if she's out shooting high-powered rifles during the ERA battle, doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think that's what she was doing. I've looked at her date books, her calendar for those years. She was traveling and speaking and going all over. Didn't have much time for recreational shooting with her overcoat on. I will say this, it's an important story. When Phyllis Schlafly needed a job, Phyllis Stewart at the time, before she was married, when she was in college, she tested high-caliber ammunition during World War II, while she went to school full-time, and she would work at an ammo plant in North St. Louis. She needed the money to support her school, and she wanted to do her part for America during the war. So it is a funny scene to see, and one that, again, doesn't really tell the truth. Let's look for more. Oh, here we go with Alice. We're in this is only the trailer, by the way, that we're examining. Alice is here. She's having second thoughts because it turns out that the sign says no ERA and happiness. And she's thinking, oh, how can we put those two things together? And remember, Alice is made up. She's a fictional character who's supposed to be Phyllis's best friend. It's not true, but you can see already the conflict is all on the side of these women who are opposing the ERA. Again, no facts, no truth, all Hollywood. We'll look for the real Mrs. America, not this Mrs. America. Let's keep watching.
When did you get so mean?
I have let you run around this country with your cause.
It's our cause.
Well, one of the slurs that you can expect to see in this kind of depiction is to make Phyllis and her husband or Phyllis and her family into some kind of crisis and some kind of troubled family. And these images here are Phyllis and her husband fighting and dramatic bickering. First of all, there's no basis in fact. Second of all, Phyllis and her husband Fred had an extraordinary marriage. They were both very successful. He is an attorney and a prominent anti-communist writer and analyst, and Phyllis, of course, in her work. Although I can't know if they ever bickered, I can know from everyone I've ever talked to that they had an extraordinary friendship, they had an extraordinary love, and that their marriage, which was based in their faith and the tradition that Christ has given us for marriage, was something very special. They treasured and loved. I don't know why Hollywood does this, except their relationships are often so broken, they wanted to picture others as the same way. But it's not true. It's not factual. It's really unfair and unkind. Maybe that's just Hollywood. Let's keep looking.
Did you really think there'd be no casualties?
Well, this is kind of fun because when you see this image, you think, wow, that seems like these women's livers are crazy. These, this is kind of, is there going to be peyote next? Is it, coming out of the 60s and all? Well, that's really true. In this case, Mrs. America is depicting this right. The people that were operating the pro-ERA movement, again, go look at the images of 1977's Houston. It's in Houston, the convention for women, hosted by the most prominent pro-ERA supporters. And you'll see some weird and wacky stuff. I mean, really outside of the mainstream. So that's about right. Even they used to throw pig's blood at state capitals. It's the kind of stuff they do. The women's livers were not normal. And I'm glad Mrs. America got that one right.
Why would God put this fire in me if he didn't want me to act on it?
At the end of this trailer, I'm left with this sinking feeling that Mrs. America is going to tell a story that's not anything that's true or that I know. The real Mrs. America, Phyllis Schlafly, did extraordinary things. She had extraordinary successes. She was an extraordinary American. She once said to me and others, she'd say, I had it all, just not all at once. And by that she meant she was a wife and a mother. She was a homemaker. She was an author. She did radio, TV. She led movements. She ran as a candidate. She had it all, just not all at once. But what she knew, that in America it was possible for each American, especially women, to have all the opportunities. And that the ERA was based on a vision that the feminists had, that the women of America should give up their rights, should give up their options, and assume the angry direction that the feminists wanted them to go in. I hope as we watch Mrs. America together and we see it stream on Hulu, that as we fact check what's going on, we can revisit and discover the great life of Phyllis Schlafly and millions of Americans, millions of American women who celebrate life and make joy in their families. And don't be misled by the Hollywood lies. The truth is so much more interesting and wonderful than the Hollywood lies. Real Mrs. America is so much better than Mrs. America. I look forward to talking to you soon.